Hello guys, Tribal Eyes again. This is the first of a small series that I have planned, in which I'll give a small retrospective view on some things, namely World of Warcraft, and Blizzard's various choices that they have made throughout its lengthy development. Today, we're starting the series with something that everybody's familiar with, the adjustments made to leveling in the most recent patch of 7.3.5. First, we'll briefly touch on why the changes were made. It was evident that ever since Mists of Pandaria, leveling in World of Warcraft has been more of a chore than a journey, whereas originally before Cataclysm era, many players valued the journey more than the destination. This was both because the world felt more difficult, and also leveling took longer. This prolonged the journey before players were used to being handed things. A great example is that the term power leveling used to mean that you'd go from levels 1 to 80 in a week or so, whereas in Warlords of Draenor, the same could be done in less than 6 hours. With that out of the way, we'll move on to the changes made in 7.3.5. The patch boasted increased leveling times and mob scaling throughout the entirety of the world prior to Legion, including in dungeons and scenarios. This meant that mobs would no longer fall over after a single hit, even with heirlooms equipped. This was initially received very positively when the changes hit the PTR in December of 2017, with many players creating new toons on the test realms, and some even taking the entire journey up to level 110. Not only would mobs be more difficult to kill, but specific zones would be grouped together under leveling categories, with some expansion zone content being linked together, allowing players to skip zones that they would rather not level in, or in some cases entire expansions, the most infamous being the Burning Crusade. Come on Blizz, revamp Outland. Another small thing to note is that the experience from utilising the dungeon finder was ultimately nerfed. In combination with the mob scaling inside the dungeons, this would mean that power leveling once you hit level 15 using dungeons would be difficult without a coordinated group and would require you to be somewhat awake. A variety of adjustments were made during and after the PTR's testing span, the most popular of which was made mere days after the changes came live in January 2018. An apparent bug had rendered a small handful of raid bosses in both Draenor and Pandaria unsoloable. Two prime examples were the Shard Pride in Siege of Orgrimmar and Hans of Franz in Blackrock Foundry. In both cases, the bosses both had so much health that killing them before specific mechanics was nearly impossible without a duo or even a trio, and would result in the boss resetting or permanently stunning the player and killing them. As I said though, this was noted as a bug by Blizzard and it was fixed within a week. Now let's move on to the actual reception of the patch. After it went live in mid-January 2018, many players such as myself found leveling to be so much more entertaining, not only to the player but to viewers who would come and watch content creators on YouTube and even Twitch. Mobs will no longer die instantly, and players would be able to create their own leveling path throughout the world. Most players revelled at this, and I believe that the best thing about this revamp was what it would do to players thinking about trying out World of Warcraft. Quick story time, and I'm sure many of you will find this story to be relatable. I introduced a friend to World of Warcraft in 2016, and they quit sometime before level 30, because they said the world felt boring and things felt too easy. And I would tell them that the best things come when you hit level 90 or so, but that's way too long for a new player to wait, and I feel now that new players will ultimately respect this change, much more than many players who joined any time after Pandaria will. That said, not everything was fine and dandy, and some players would much rather stick to what the world used to be. These changes hit some players very hard. It's not mere coincidence that most of the players who were against this revamp were players who came to World of Warcraft between late Cataclysm and late Legion, where leveling was most easiest. Some players would argue that alt switching would now be near impossible, and some players would argue that power boosting a new character would be nearly impossible, despite sure ways of skipping the content being in place by Blizzard, notably the level 110 boost, heirlooms, and the experience bonus potions. But this audience was small, and wasn't really going to get listened to, at least not by Blizzard. That said, this audience soon grew, due to one large feature that was announced with Battle for Azeroth, and soon came to live servers. With the launch of pre-purchased Battle for Azeroth, many players were very eager to get the heritage armor linked with the new allied races that was added. Blizzard had made it very clear that you could not simply boost a character to max level and enjoy the armor, or race change your main or a character about to hit max level. In order to truly enjoy these new armor sets, players would have to level a brand new allied race from level 20 to level 110. And this forced some players who were not fans of the new leveling experience but had not previously said anything to level their characters, and ultimately the forums went wild, split into two teams. The team that would argue their case against the new leveling changes, and the team that would defend the changes to the very end. In conclusion, I'd argue that most of the changes made by Blizzard were done with great intention. Leveling has been a problem in World of Warcraft for over 2 expansions, and many players would find leveling in alt to be more of a race to max level before they could really do anything. Even if you're on the side that disagrees with all these changes and all the leveling speeds, you cannot argue that the mere fact of joining an MMORPG, it should feel epic, and the world should feel large. Leveling in dungeons to max level quickly can feel daunting, especially to new players, and can ultimately overburden them. In addition, one-shotting most monsters in the world has never really entertained people. It doesn't feel epic. Nonetheless, I'd love for a discussion in the comments. That's all from me, guys. Like this video or dislike it. Let me know what you think of this new mini-series. Comment your opinions on the patch, as well as what you guys might think on these more scripted videos, because let's face it, I'm not a good writer. And please, subscribe to the new channel. There's nothing I can do at this point, guys. And as usual, guys, stay dry.